Can the Moro people decide for themselves? Can we govern ourselves? Can the current reactionary non-Moro establishment stop us from governing ourselves? And the real question is, can we determine our society or our destiny? Do we have that right in the first place? ARMM was a concession by the Ramos government to the Moro National Liberation Front or MNLF, which ended its decades-old secessionist armed struggle in capitulation. In exchange for the bloodshed and the thousands martyred in the cause of the Bangsamoros' fight to secede, the Misuwari leadership of the MNLF settled for a space in the prevailing elitist, chauvinist, corrupt-laden political structure in Philippine society. Yes, ARMM was autonomous, only in as far as it gave the representatives of the Moro landed class and big business the free rein to plunder people's money, pave the way for business investments to exploit Mindanao natural resources, and worsen the landlessness of the Talyawids. And yet, the Aquino administration chose to pick ARMM from among its more corrupt and elitist local governments to be its test case for pseudo-reforms. Pressured to resolve the injustice and warlordism in Mindanao in the wake of the infamous Ampatuan massacre, the Aquino administration brings the fate of the ARMM to its own hands and postpones the scheduled political exercise of changing guards. The Aquino is poised to appoint its own OICs or officers in charge, purportedly to get rid of the massive corruption, ineptitude, practice of command votes, private armies, and address the disturbingly low human development indices prevailing in the region in just 21 months. Far from serving the true interests of the Moro people, ARMM has become an instrument of the state in collusion with landed elites and powerful political clans in maddening and trivializing the issue of self-determination. Throughout the history of ARMM, only those favored and handpicked by the powers that be in Malacanang can secure its leadership. Moreover, the policies and decisions made at its level have never been without approval of the same institution. The cancellation of ARMM election is a microcosm of the prevailing suffering of the Moro people on top of the three basic problems of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism. What it demonstrated was the chauvinism, discrimination, and the outright trampling of the Moro people's right to self-determination. The Bangsamoros' right to decide and not to decide in the context of the elitist and bourgeois Philippine elections is still a matter within the purview of the reactionary state. The Moro people comprise around 10 to 14% of the total population of the Philippines, which is estimated to be around 97 million at the of present. The word Moro was first used by the Spanish to refer to the indigenous Muslims who at the time of their arrival have established the most advanced form of society in the Philippines, particularly in Mindanao and in the islands of Sulu. Accordingly, they liken the local Muslim population to the Moors of North Africa. Today, the term Moro or Bangsamoro refers to a group of 13 ethno-linguistic tribes who share a similar identity and history that set them apart from the rest of the Filipinos. The largest of these tribes are the Maguindanaon, Tausug, Maranao, and Iranon. The ARM or ARMM or the areas that compose it are home to the largest concentration of Moro people. For more than 3 centuries, the Moros managed to foil every attempt of the Spanish to conquer and subjugate them. However, their resistance to foreign powers was finally shattered during the American occupation. The once mighty and resolute political structure of the Moros waned in the assault of a well-armed and duplicitous foe. The tragic massacres in Buddaho and Budbagsak in the island of Sulu in the early part of the 18th century where more than 2,000 mostly women and children were brutally murdered by American soldiers, exemplify the cruelty and menacing resolve of the Americans to crush every ounce of resistance during their invasion. Perhaps it can also be said to be the start of the systematic subjugation of the Moro people that continue to this day, more or less by the same oppressors and their local representatives. Throughout the American occupation of the country and the succeeding Philippine puppet regimes, the Moros witnessed how their ancestral lands were forcibly occupied by multinational companies and the Filipino settlers from Luzon and Visayas through biased legal pronouncements. One example was the Act 141, promulgated during the American administration that restricted the right of the Moro to register land to a maximum of 4 hectares. In contrast, a Christian settler can own up to 24 hectares, while landlords or companies can own at least 1,024 hectares. However, at the peak of the Marcos dictatorship in the 1970s, land grabbing intensified and attacks by anti-Moro military-backed fanatics triggered the Moros to rise up and struggle. The Bangsamoro people were further inflamed with the Jabida massacre, where some 28 Moro military youth trainees in Corridor were strafed to death on March 18, 1967. The 28 were among the 200 Moro youth recruited by the Marcos regime to seize the Moro-dominated Sabah, Malaysia under the Operation Merdeka. Fearing for the lives of their relatives living in Sabah, the 28 martyrs tried to abandon the operation, but Marcos military troops massacred them to silence them forever. Survivors later exposed Operation Merdeka and the massacre. It was during this time that the Moro National Liberation Front, or MNLF, was organized by few members affiliated with the Kilusang Makabayan to lead and arm the resistance against the Marcos government. No longer can the Moros sit idly while the government, in collusion with landed elites, slowly rob them of their rights and stifle their very existence. Problems in leadership led Hashim Salamat to form a breakaway group that was less Marxist and founded on the tenets of jihad according to the Quran, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF. In its years of dealing with the two main Moro secessionist groups in the country, the MNLF and the MILF, the government's objective has always been putting an end to the rebellion and not so much in addressing the grounds for it. Social injustice and the issue on land remain to be among the cornerstones of the Bangsamoro struggle. Notably, it is no different to the hardships faced by a vast majority of the Filipinos today. Farm villages occupied by the Moro people in Mindanao are steeped in steep feudalism, lorded over by the big landlords and warlords like the Ampatuans, who is the primary suspect of the Ampatuan massacre, the Mamboros, Mangudadatus, Datumanong, and others. Usury, high land rent, low harvest, cheap farm gate prices, and lack of government subsidy are the problems faced by the Talyawids or Moro peasants. As landlessness worsens, military operations against the MNLF and currently the MILF and the New People's Army have led to grave human rights abuses.